It's hard to say when anything truly begins. If we look back and we try to find the exact starting point of some really important thread of our life, there's different ways to tell the story. I'm often really struck by this when I'll be talking to a spouse about the moment that they met their beloved. And of course, many people do remember the exact time and place that they met their person, but that's almost never the full answer to the question, because then they'll get sort of this faraway look in their eye, and many times they'll then take me even further back, and they'll tell me about how, well, this friend introduced this cousin to this acquaintance, or this unlikely chain of events that led to them being in that location on that particular day when they could have easily been somewhere else. And what if they had walked through another door, or had one more or one fewer number of red lights on the commute and arrived at a slightly different time? Or what if they'd said, nah, I'm staying in that night? Often it is one seemingly small decision long before the actual meeting that led to the life-changing event of finding the love of their life. The Gospel of Mark, the earliest gospel, starts with the pronouncement, "This is the beginning of the good news of Jesus Christ, the Son of God," and then presents us with a fully grown Jesus standing beside the Jordan River, ready to be baptized by John. Well, Matthew and Luke disagree with this and say, wait, hold on, hang on a minute. We have to go farther back. We have to hear about his birth. And then we have the Gospel of John that we're reading from today. And as you guys know, John has a more cosmic, a more mystical perspective. So John, trying to trace back to the starting point of this life-changing event of Christ coming into the world, takes us back to the beginning of time, to the beginning of the universe. And here in this gospel that we heard today, he's in that poetic frame of mind again. The author of John has Jesus telling folks about how the Father loves the Son, and all of us are caught up in that love and carried along inside of it. And this is the beginning for John. Love between persons. Love was the very first thing, before anything else. A few centuries later, theologians took this beautiful insight and drew out of it the doctrine of the Trinity. But the mystics summed it up in a different way, a little bit of a less formal way. Aelred of Rievaulx put it best. God is friendship, he said. Friendship is the starting point of Christianity and the heart of everything. When I think about this parish in its current form, if you try to follow our story back and ask what was the beginning of Spiritus Christi, you could say it was around 1998, 1999 when we founded a new faith community beyond the diocese. But of course, the seed was growing long before that. It was growing through many years at Corpus Christi when people were being drawn into the heart of the mission of this church, into a spirit of love for each other and inclusion and mission with the poor. That heart and that spirit were there long before the prison outreach had even one building, much less the dozen or so that they have now. It was here before Grace of God existed, before the mental health center existed. That heart and that spirit were here before we were ever profiled on the news, before the pews were full. In fact, even when the pews were nearly empty, they were here. There's a lot of ways to tell a story. That's what the Gospels show us. But here is a telling of our story that I like. The beginning of Spiritus Christi was long before any of us got here. The beginning of Spiritus Christi was a seemingly small decision many years before even Father Jim arrived at Corpus Christi. A decision among 5 seminarians to buy an old broken down car and share it communally and dedicate themselves to several principles that would govern their relationships with each other. Share everything. Welcome everyone. Redistribute money. Live simply. Don't worry. Laugh often. They didn't invent this philosophy themselves, of course. They got it from the gospel. They called their fellowship the Student Baker Corporation, blending their occupation and the type of car they drove. One of the members was Jim, not yet father, Jim Callan. Share everything. Welcome everyone. Redistribute money. Live simply. Don't worry. Laugh often. In the beginning was friendship. And friendship is still the root of so much that we do here today. Speaking from the heart is almost completely a ministry of human connection and conversation. The motto for our Chiapas mission is Amigos Sin Fronteras, friends without borders. Our being asked to help build a hospital in Haiti grew out of many, many years of just being present and getting to know the people of Bourne. In my own years working with chronically homeless folks, just about every time that somebody who had lived outdoors most of their life reached the point of being able to say yes to an apartment, in just about every instance, that only came after years and years and years of getting to know the social workers that went out on street outreach and coming to see them over time, not as people standing above, but as equals and as humans and as friends. All true justice work begins with relationships, spending time with people and sharing in their life. Without that, nothing else is possible. I wonder what Aelred of Rilvo and the mystics would think about our situation today. We are in a crisis of friendship right now, and this is true across the globe, but especially in wealthy Western countries like ours. Today in the United States, 1 out of every 10 people would say they don't have a close friend. 62%, a majority, say that they can't name 5 close friends. And among older adults, the numbers get higher. Among young adults, believe it or not, they're even worse. 1 in 5 people in their 20s and 30s say that they have few friends or none. And for men, it's becoming especially commonplace to report having no friendships at all. So why is it so hard? It does feel like it's gotten harder to make friends, doesn't it? One factor seems to be that we move around a lot more than we used to. We change cities for jobs, for school, to be near children or grandchildren who've moved away. A lot of us don't have roots in one town in the same way that people used to who lived their whole lives in one place. And with that came a sense of community, neighbors who you'd known since you were a kid. We also work more, so less of our day is spent investing in our relationships of every kind, including our friendships. We have less time for doing nothing or exploring something just for fun, areas where we used to just fortuitously cross paths with people who might become friends. With the earnings from our jobs, many of us feel pressure to climb certain social ladders. And one of the things that it's still a hope of many people to achieve is a house. Well, if your house is in the suburbs, it might be far enough from the nearest other house that you can't even see your neighbors. And the wealthier you become in our country, the greater the fascination with things being private, even to the extreme of, for extreme wealth, private cabins, private jets, private islands. The whole point is deliberate isolation from other humans. Apartness is the key to value. So this is an insidious consciousness today. We also tend to embrace competition more than cooperation, which is antithetical to friendship. And we embrace self-reliance. I have to do this myself, or otherwise I'm a failure or I'm needy. That's a powerful part of the American consciousness. Needing others is a sign of weakness, is what this mentality says. And so we turn back to ourselves, even though this makes us miserable. Finally, we have counterfeit connections in such good supply. Having 1,000 Facebook friends, or 2 million Instagram followers, or even getting texts from people all day long is just not the same as deep, meaningful, face-to-face interactions that our souls hunger for. So what a beautiful and needed reminder from Jesus today about how central friendship is to everything. Someone once quipped, you know what Jesus' greatest miracle was? Was it walking on water? No. Was it feeding the 5,000? No. Water into wine? Nope, not that either. Jesus' most miraculous accomplishment was having 12 close friends in his 30s. The young adult row knows what I'm talking about. In all seriousness, though, Jesus put friendships at the center right till the end, even from the cross. Remember that beautiful story that we hear about him, how he knew that one of his disciples, the person that the Gospel of John refers to as the one Jesus loved, would be sad in such a particular way after he died. So he entrusted that person to the care of his own mother, and he entrusted his mother to the care of that friend. He said to his soul friend, here is your mother. And to his mom, woman, here's your child. Even when he was going through his own worst time, he was thinking about his friends. I expect a lot of us have trouble making friends because we struggle with judgment, either of others or of ourselves. Maybe we have expectations of what sort of person a friend has to be or who we have to be worthy of befriending. And again, the best thing we can do here is to look at Jesus' circle. Remember, it was never closed, and it included people that he'd probably known since he was a kid and people he met by chance much later, people like Matthew, who was just standing there by the side of the road when Jesus called out to him out of nowhere. Despite his being a tax collector, somebody who at first glance would seem to have a very different set of politics and interests and commitments than Jesus had. He was friendly with Samaritans, Roman soldiers who unexpectedly revealed a hidden kindness, with Pharisees like Nicodemus, with wealthy folks like Joseph of Arimathea and Zacchaeus, and folks who had nothing. Interestingly, we don't hear about one fellow carpenter or craftsman in Jesus' friend group, but he seems to have learned a lot from people with different occupations than him, especially from fishermen. Jesus had a radical openness to people. It seemed like he went through life expecting that anybody could be a kindred spirit, and that's within our reach too. When we think about attending more to our friendships, it's easy to go to a spiral of self-shame. I should be less anxious. I should be more outgoing. There's a lot of pressure associated with this conversation, you might have noticed. So maybe we can set that down. It doesn't seem too helpful. I suspect that the hardest thing, even harder than just making time for friendships, is believing that we deserve them. That somebody could know us as we truly are, without masks, and not find us wanting. If we worry about our value, can there be any better words to meditate on than those of Jesus in this gospel? They're addressed to all of us. I have called you friends, says the Lord. The brother who stood beside us to be baptized, the one whose love guides the stars and the galaxies. You are my friends. He repeats it in case we couldn't take it in the first time. We've already found favor with God. And that means that nobody else's disfavor ultimately matters. So why not take the risk of reaching out? When Henry David Thoreau The great transcendentalist, the writer of Walden and Civil Disobedience, had reached the end of his life. He was visited by a clergy person who seemed to have been trained in a bit of a gloomy version of Christianity. The priest seemed to feel duty bound to ask for his confession, so he asked him, "Have you made your peace with God?" Thoreau looked back at the stern clergyman and smiled. When he answered, his voice was peaceful and light. With confidence, he replied, "I wasn't aware that we had ever quarreled."